Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is a musician. Jesus, you'd think I wouldn't screw that word up when I say that word all the time. Apologies. My guest hails all the way from the United States. He is known as Andrew and the Moon. And I don't really know exactly quite how to define your sound. But before we get into that, welcome to the show. How you doing, my friend?
Thanks, man. Thank you for having me on here. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this, so it's really cool. And it was really cool the way we met on Reddit. I'm sure you want to talk about that in a bit, but yeah, first time meeting you. Great, psyched to be on the show.
Actually, yeah, it's good that you mentioned that. I'll just give a quick shout out because I think this is useful to podcasters and musicians alike. Reddit is actually a fantastic place, if you don't know already, to first of all get promotion, just in general. Secondly, yeah, with podcasts, I believe we met either in the podcasting subreddit or the podcast guest exchange subreddit, which is like a new one. It's pretty like simple concept, but a good idea nonetheless. And you obviously get lots of people in there. You get podcasters and you get musicians such as yourself saying like, "Hey, I'm available." And but although I believe actually I found you on a different subreddit. I don't know what I'm talking about, but yeah, I've just on a side note. But yeah, I think I found you in
It was
the
acoustic originals.
That's where I found you. Yeah, because normally if I do post in there, I'm posting my own stuff. But I just looked at I think I looked at the artwork for your latest record, and I was just like, I think I'll give this guy a go. Let's just take a chance. And I was really glad that I did, because not to kiss your ass or anything, but the music is fantastic. I've been blaring it like all week. I do this volunteering stuff around the city that I'm in, and this guy that I do a lot of the volunteering with, because we work in a truck basically, like going around this city, like collecting and giving donations and such. And he's really into his music as well, particularly reggae music. So I was like, oh my god, you got to check this out. And I've put on your music and we were blasting it. And yeah, if you want to listen to Andrew's music, Andrew and the Moon on Spotify, make sure you got a good sound system, because you literally, you pick up on so much more. And like, I was kind of blown away by that, because when I first listened to it, I just listened to it on my shitty computer, and yeah, it was excellent. But like when I listened to it in the van with, the full surround system and everything, there was a lot more I didn't hear. And it was, I guess, like a lot more immersive or something. So for me, it kind of made me think like, okay, this is how it's intended to be heard, I think. But let's get straight into like the sound, because the only thing I could really compare this to is when I heard you singing, occasionally I felt like your voice sounded like the singer from the band, Sublime. Are you familiar with them? Yeah. So I heard like a little bit of that. For those who don't know, Sublime is this kind of like, I guess, like ska reggae kind of punk outfit from America that had a couple of tracks, a couple of bangers in the 2000s. If you haven't heard them, go check them out. They're awesome. But Andrew's music had that sound as far as the vocals are concerned, but that's where the comparison ends. Everything else is like a mixture of reggae, psychedelic music, just very kind of out there styles. So I guess what I wanted to ask you as the first question is like, how would you define your sound?
That's a really tough one, because I've kind of been working on that for a long time, and I didn't really want to like have a definition for my sound. And look, in hindsight, like there's something like I realized after putting the music out, like I could kind of take an objective look at it and say like, okay, like I'm glad that was what it is. And at this point, I'm almost ready to like try to focus that a little more with more music. And but as far as defining my sound, I definitely grew up on Sublime. That was like, so you nailed that. And I've never been a singer, a strong singer, but I've been my whole more and more nowadays. You don't really need to be that great of a singer. You just kind of have to have a vibe and make it work. And so that's kind of what I've been working on a lot, and trying to get like just more comfortable using my voice as opposed I'm mostly play bass, which is kind of
Mhm.
why I went more into the reggae vein of things and grew up my first experience in high school starting a band. We made a reggae band and it was just I think that's I don't know what kicked it off, the whole reggae kick, but that's definitely where I center all my musical thinking. But as far as after that, it's just, a mixture of everything I've heard for my entire life.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing actually, because online, this whole project, everything you're doing, it kind of looks to me like you've kind of been away a while, and you've set up this thing, and this is a new project, and you're like, yeah, starting from scratch kind of deal. But clearly, as you've sort of outlined there, you've been playing since high school, which many musicians have. That's generally where we start, right? But I was very curious, like, you must have had projects in the intervening years up until this point, because as musicians we're always involved in several different projects. It's just how it is. And I was very curious to kind of learn about that, and you know what was the reason behind your decision to take that break. And because it kind of ties in with the themes of this record, which we'll get into in a little bit. But it's very much like a feel good record. The name of the record is What the Future Holds. And I really felt like this for you was a kind of like you saying, like, I'm back, I'm in a much more positive mindset, let's rock and roll. But yeah, what kind of happened like beforehand? Like what kind of projects were you involved in?
So before all this started, I over the years I would kind of just, I would be working on songs nonstop, like, or I would just make a bunch of beats and then there'd be one that would, just shine through and I would work on that for months on end and then just get tired of it. And then, I'm an audio engineer, so
Oh, okay.
I work at a studio and I so sometimes I'll be away for 12 hours out of the day just sitting behind a computer recording stuff. Last thing I want to do when I get home is do more of that.
Right. Yeah.
Fortunate as that sounds, but I would find time to work on my own music and get stuff done. And I'm glad that my job helps me get my own music out easier. But uh I'm derailing. Here we go. This will happen a few times.
Hey, it's fine, take your time, it's all good.
We were talking about, what was the question again?
Right. So basically, what I was wondering was, in terms of the intervening years between high school and up to your
Oh, okay.
record right now, like the different projects you've been involved in. So as you've highlighted right there, obviously your day job, your work as an audio engineer takes up a great deal of your time, which I understand. Many people, I think, can relate here. When you've got some sort of daytime job or whatever, that takes up a lot of your time, and it leaves very little time for everything else. And again, as you outlined there, that it's the like you said, it's the last thing you want to do when you get home is more work. I completely understand that element to it. But yeah, were there any other projects, anything different to this perhaps?
Yeah. So I actually, I'll speak to this later, but I had a bunch of songs that I put out on SoundCloud,
Right.
and it was kind of like I and I do have a bunch of songs on SoundCloud, but that was kind of my discography, like my personal discography, if you will,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like just something where I could see my own progression. And I never really like pushed it out there. It was just kind of like, oh, my friends who followed me on that could listen to them, but it was never anything like that I was really pushing for because I didn't really have time to be an artist or like work on stuff like that. So I had this compilation of music out, and then after not putting out music for 2 years, I just had, I probably had like 30 to 40 songs just ready,
Wow.
not ready to go, but that were like I felt were decent enough, but only so many that were ready. And I had planned to have like 12 songs on the record, but when it came down to it, I was stuck at a point and I was like, why have I just been, continuously throwing paint at this wall for so long when I could just, take the songs that I feel like I've done enough for, and just,
Mm.
make a project and a whole.
I get what you're saying. Yeah. So you're basically, you've always been writing. And in this last 2 years, you're kind of been thinking like, yeah, I need to put pen to paper and actually make this into something now and then pursue this. Essentially what you're saying. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And I would always go back, rewrite songs I felt could have been better, and like, creating just getting new things out of the same old stuff for so long. And at one point I was just like, I couldn't feel like I could create anything new because I had all
mm,
the stuff that was just there. And it's like, what are you going to do with it? Is it just going to sit there forever? It's like, and that was just weighing on me so heavy. And I was trying so hard to finish everything that I just had to just step back and just be like, you know what? I'm done. I want to move on.
yeah.
And I'm psyched for what the future holds.
You know, it's funny that you bring this up because I feel exactly the same way about my own music. Like honestly, right now I've been writing I guess like solo music since 2013 on and off. But in the last year and a half, where I decided to really give YouTube a go and do all different types of content, obviously I got back into music, and I sort of said to myself, as soon as I get some equipment up here, I'm going to start writing again. And I did that, and lo and behold, loads and loads of songs started coming. Because it's how it is. You get some inspiration, you start writing, whatever. And I'm in the same boat as you. Like I got all these songs from years ago that I've written, got all these songs now, and the more and more the songs kind of build up, it's like eventually gotta do like a studio thing. And I'm nervous about it because I did like a 2013 EP, but back then I didn't really feel as strong a musician because I'd been in bands and stuff before, and that was where I felt comfortable. But when I started doing solo stuff, that's a very different venture. It's a lot more pressure, and I'm sure you can relate, and especially with what you were saying before, that pressure to make that first record, that first kind of example of like, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is me. Like that's a lot of pressure, and it's because you don't want to like just put out anything, obviously, and you don't want to put out something that kind of almost like pigeonholes you or something, into like one particular area. And that's why I really respect what you said about, just taking your time, like going back, trying different things with previous songs, and really trying to spend time working out what the sound is, like how it should sound, what it should be like. Because even to this day, like all these years later with my own music, I'm still trying to figure it out, really. You know what I mean? I think it takes a while, but like to all those musicians out there that are in a similar boat, just, I think my advice would be to just wait until that moment when it feels right and then pull the trigger, which to me kind of sounds like exactly what you did. You said it was a 2-year process, and then, okay, now's the time, pull the trigger.
Yeah,
But
it was. I mean, the whole process was actually slightly more than 2 years. It was probably like 3 or 4, more like. But
yeah,
I mean, over that time, I think I released maybe like 3 songs or 4 songs over those 4 years, and it was just kind of like I didn't really promote them. I did a
mm,
few, like, made a few posts, just like, hey, I put out some music, but it was never like put it on Spotify, put it on Apple Music, like have a whole collection of music. Because I didn't really, like you were saying, like it's tough to like put yourself out there, like here's a collection of stuff that I feel encapsulates who I am, or something like that. And
mm.
it yeah, it was definitely nerve-wracking, that's for sure. And putting yourself, you're like wearing your heart on your sleeves, kind of, and just stuff that you've been working on personally and just really thinking a lot about, and it's finally out there, and I don't have to think about it anymore, and I'm stoked about that. And hopefully people can just enjoy it for what it is.
I mean, it's a great record. Like I said, I've been listening to it on repeat, and yeah, finding different things with it every single time. And one thing, after you've obviously had a couple of listens, and you just get to grips with the sound and everything, obviously you start paying more attention to the words. And I'm a lyric writer myself, always have been, so I do kind of notice these things a bit more. Maybe I know, because what I mean by that point is that every musician, or every no, screw it. Everyone that listens to music finds different things. You know what I mean? Some people are, more interested in what's going on with the drums or the bass or the lyrics or whatever the case may be. And for me, I started really paying attention to some of these lyrical themes you had. And what I've got from it so far is that it's basically mental health awareness and overall kind of positivity. But I kind of felt like, in a way, and it's fine if I got this wrong, I don't mind. But to me, I kind of felt like we're kindred spirits in a sense, because a lot of the time when I write music like this as well, where it's like talking about like going through a particularly hard thing in life or whatever, I tend to write it from the perspective of like, hey, like as though I was speaking to myself, like, hey, you'll be okay. This is how it will go, and that's kind of how I felt listening to this record. It kind of felt like a bunch of different songs kind of talking maybe to your audience and also to yourself, and kind of saying like, this is how you get over these struggles that we all have. This is how you overcome these things. It's important to be positive. It's important to talk about these things and get them out there. Would I be correct in that kind of assumption, or is there more to it with these lyrical themes? Like what was the kind of mentality behind the themes of the record?
Yeah, so I guess the thing as a whole, I over the past few years, I've just been, I've been struggling with lyric writing myself, because that's a whole nother version of, putting yourself out there, the things that you write,
Yeah.
and then there's, how you sing them. But so it's been a struggle over the past few years to really get words on paper and feel like I resonate with those words, and like don't try to feel like I'm just saying stuff to like make it sound like a cool song or something like that. But it it's definitely, you're definitely correct in the fact that it's definitely kind of just like a, like just trying to just, instill a feeling in people and like try to get them to, look at things differently, or that's a general theme for a lot of the songs. But then there's a few songs like the fifth track, Riverbed. That one I would say I wrote mostly about my friend who passed away a few years ago, and he was actually in the band in high school that we were in. And but it's also kind of, it's not very specific what I'm saying. It's very general and vague. So it could be about, like a lost love or whatever kind of relationship in your life. But that's like definitely uh a big thing for across a lot of the songs. I try to like make it so it's, somewhat universally relatable.
Mm. Yeah, I found a similar thing with not just with music, but also with things like acting and stuff. When I'm writing these things, that sometimes you might start with an idea about a specific event in your life or a feeling about something, and then you get inspirations from other things, and you kind of put together something that becomes something more or something else. It's funny, like there's so many musicians out there and great bands that have released songs, and the fans obviously go like, oh, it's clearly about this thing, it's clearly about this person. And it's like, it might start with that, there might be some truth in it, but ultimately, the song is it's a story, isn't it? It's a poem, it's many things. It can kind of start as one thing and grow into something completely different. And I think that's a really cool kind of thing behind this record. Like, I think that the key thing I want to get across with this record is that there's, it's a type of record that you listen to a lot of different times and you get different things out of it each time, I think. And just in general, it's a real good feel good record. It's very chilled and relaxing, so it's not like, I don't know how to put it exactly, but it's something that you can kind of put it on and kind of have like a dance to it or whatever, or you can just sit back and relax to it. And I think that's always good to have a record that's like that, because I feel like sometimes with more chilled out music, sometimes it's like too chilled, and it's like, oh man, yeah, I really got to do something today. Like, but this record kind of sits somewhere in the middle, which is pretty cool. But yeah. So in terms of like how things move forward past this record, obviously this is a recent release, it's just come out, so make sure everyone goes out and streams the hell out of this. It's called What the Future Holds, and you mentioned it's not just available on Spotify. Is it, where else can people listen to the record?
It's pretty much everywhere. Apple Music, Spotify, yeah, Amazon. You pretty much find it anywhere. Napster, that's still a thing, I guess.
Wow, Napster's still a thing. That's amazing. Blows my mind.
Yeah, YouTube, yeah, anywhere.
Nice, nice, nice. And obviously, so we're coming to the end of 2020. So I would presume then maybe you're considering, a 2021 record. Will we be looking at maybe in an EP or another full length? Like, what does the future hold for Andrew and the Moon?
So right now, I'm actually helping one of my good friends who was also in the band in high school. Over Thanksgiving, I'm going to record 4 songs for him, and it's kind of more of a uh, folky thing, a folky country thing, but definitely some Andrew and the Moon influence in it. That's for sure.
Oh, nice, nice.
That'll be fun. So I'm kind of taking the time right now to relax from like a new chapter. To be cliche, I guess, a new chapter has begun. And so definitely next year, at least a 5 song EP at
Nice.
some point next year. And uh, yeah, I'm just definitely just chilling out right now, just trying to, obviously 2020 has had a lot of uh, issues, I guess. And but at the same time, I don't think this would have happened if everything this year hadn't happened. I had a lot of time. A lot of these songs were written. Half of these songs were written this past year, or like since March, since the lockdown began in California, and yeah, and then so that's it's just the way things go. And I actually am planning on taking some of my SoundCloud releases and just making an EP. So before I was Andrew and the Moon, uh, I was going by Galactic Drew,
Okay.
which carries its own vibe in itself. And I kind of was like, that sounds more like an EDM DJ's name, someone who's like, shooting lasers and smoke screens and,
Yeah.
you know, blasting kick drums. And we, I just, I was kind of like, I don't know where I was going with that. I did a remix for a friend and I was like, Galactic Drew remix. So that's a remix name or something, but I'm gonna put out an EP called Galactic EP, just of all the songs I made while I was kind of doing that, and it was just kind of part of my search for where I am now, I guess.
I think when this record begins to pick up some like serious traction, which it will, like trust me, it will. You're gonna get a lot more requests for music, because I mean that's how it works, isn't it? Once that following starts building up and people start asking, the pressure kind of builds a little bit. And obviously, you know, it's kind of a good and a bad thing, but I think that yeah, we're going to see a lot more music from you in 2021. That's for sure. But it makes sense to release the old stuff and get it out there as well. And obviously, as you said, like you'll put your own take on it. So I imagine that it will kind of fit more in line with this record. Because I know you said before that it was very much I suppose like a process of finding what the music will sound like, what it will be like, and stuff. And because that's an important point as well, is like consistency across a full length. Like that's one of the reasons, for instance, those who listen to my music and have asked me like, "Hey, why don't you go in the studio? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?" Well, a big element to that is finding that consistency, because a record is a lot like a storybook. You write it in chapters, but it's all got to be consistent in terms of like the sound across all the songs, maybe like a lyrical theme or something. It doesn't have to be, but it makes it easier. So obviously, if you're trying to create that record, you need to kind of have all the pieces of the jigsaw kind of fitting together first, and then comes the whole process of actually recording and doing everything else. But yeah, I look forward to seeing that chapter soon. I sense good things for you. But before we move on, I got to ask, what's the story behind the name? I feel like there's a story there.
Okay. There is a story. There actually is a story now that I think so. Uh, Two of my friends, they have a group called Beach Noise, and I was just hanging out with them and helping them out with music. I'll like play bass and stuff like that, but or keys or whatever. And I got a telescope because I was just like, we were, there was some clear skies out, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get a telescope. We're gonna look at some cool shit in the sky. And uh, I went out there. I was like, oh, I can't wait till the moon comes out and we'll see the moon and we'll look at the moon and all that stuff. And the moon, for some reason, I don't know, it was the time of the year or that where we were, but the moon didn't rise where we were for 2 weeks, or it was hidden or something. It wasn't around, or the days it was out, cloud cover everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
So for 2 weeks straight, it was like I was searching, trying to get the moon. And so they were like, Andrew and the Moon. Like, that should be your independent name. I was like, yeah, you know what? I dig it. And it was kind of funny story, but also at the same time, kind of like felt more fitting than Galactic Drew.
I tend to agree. No, but it is always good. I mean, you typically there's always a story behind a name. I remember like when I named my first ever band, and literally the song just came from. Sorry, the band name came from a song, and I thought it was cool, and we picked it, and we all agreed on it. But like it's so much better when you hear about people's stories behind things when it has meaning, because often like a band's name will start from a song and then they'll just choose like to name it after that. But I've heard other bands have like pretty cool stories which I don't know if I believe. Like I remember there was this like metal band years ago called Fall of Troy, if you're familiar with them. And apparently their story is that they were flipping in some sort of like history book or something, and like they just randomly turned to one page, and one of the members of the band put his finger on like a particular phrase or page, and it said Fall of Troy, and he's like, okay, yeah, Fall of Troy. And I'm like, come on, man, what are the chances of that? Like but
It could have been named something else.
yeah, yeah, like something just really like random, like a piece of pottery or something.
We live in a different world.
Jeez. Um, let's talk a little bit about your inspirations. I mean, I obviously, as I mentioned there, I heard a bit of Sublime in there, but I didn't want to kind of assume anything else. So like, I'd like to know who are your main inspirations for your music, in terms of like just everything in general. What were you inspired? Who were you inspired by?
So I guess from the beginning, I growing up. I have two younger sisters, and we were always listening to pop music growing up.
Yeah.
Like, loved pop music. And then as I started going into more middle school, late elementary era, I was more into the rock, like Blink 182 and like punky stuff, but also like pop punk. And then in middle school, I got more into like, kind of like heavier stuff, like kind of like post-hardcore and like screamo kind of stuff. And then in high school, I got into Sublime, and it was over from there. And
How do you mean?
I was ever since then, I just like have had like something for like reggae. And I mean, I'd always, listened to Bob Marley growing up, had
Mm,
visited like the Caribbean and Jamaica and
yeah, yeah.
Hawaii when we were younger. And it was kind of, synonymous with vacation life and like just good vibes all around. And but I've been trying to figure out where the reggae has come from for a long time, but honestly, I think it's just a vibe, and it's it's fun, and it can be bright or it can be dark
Mm,
and meaningful. I mean, you know, it can be dark too, just straight up dark. But I've really just so I think I guess looking at it now, I had the reggae and then loving all the pop stuff, and then the like in post hardcore and screamo kind of stuff, there was decent production and all that stuff. So I think all the pop, like electronic and production elements mixed with the reggae is kind of like is what is kind of coming out at this point.
yeah.
So, but yeah, as far as that's pretty much as far as where my musical journey went. But bands specifically to and Sublime, I
Yeah.
think those would be like the top three spread across, like the main ones that.
So we lost you a little bit there for a second. Could you just repeat those bands? I know you said Blink 182 and Sublime. What was the other one?
And then Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Red Hot Chili Peppers, right? Nice one, nice one. Well, I mean, I know you said that like you're not 100% sure where the reggae element came to it from, but like obviously, ska. I don't know the history, but I think ska comes from reggae. Does it or does it not? Like, they're so similar? I mean, yeah, because when I grew up in the UK, we had this band called Madness, and they were that kind of introduced me to ska originally, and then I found like all these other bands that were like ska, but like I guess like ska slash pop punk. So like I'd kind of put Sublime in that category. And there's a few others. I mean, I don't know if I've got this right. Yeah, like bands like what's the name? Zebrahead. That's another one. Yeah, just like you'd hear all these crazy elements in the song, so you could never really straight up say that it's just pop punk, because there was all this ska influence in there, and obviously ska is like really fast. It often is like really fast reggae, but obviously it can be really slowed down as well.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it's cool. I mean, I think in this record there's a lot of kind of like very like your Instagram tag or line on your Insta or your bio sums it up very well. It's like something like space dub funk something, and I'm like, that's pretty much it. It's like very kind of out there and
I can read it. Future dub roots rock post psych space sounds.
there you go. That says it all, really.
I don't know where that came up with that. It just works.
Yeah, I mean, so many of the musicians that I've had on the podcast, you know, because I love all types of music, especially like really experimental stuff. I don't know, maybe it's just a musician thing. You start with like basic stuff, and then throughout the years you get more interested in more experimental stuff. I suppose because it's different from the conventional, isn't it? If you listen to a pop song, it's typically 4 bars, same stuff you've heard a million times before with a slightly different, you know, flavor on the same thing. Whereas experimental music, you know, alternative music, whatever the case may be, is often inspired by lots of stuff that you've heard, but like still unique and still different, you know? Like, for example, I really like Mac DeMarco, and I feel that he's highly underrated. Like, I felt like a lot of his earlier records are like fantastic music, but not just because it's good music, but also because it's just very experimental, you know. And I think it's always very important as a musician to kind of be like that. And that actually leads me on to my next question, because with his latest record, which was released last year, he made the switch from being on a label to being independent. And there seems to be a trend with a lot of musicians doing this now, going independent. And obviously, it's ideal for big, you know, super successful bands and artists, because, you know, they will own all of their music and obviously all the money that comes with that, and so on and so forth. But it's not just about that. It's also about the creative control over a record. Like, I always found it kind of crazy listening to bands talk about how much of a impact like the record company could have over the creative process. And I was like, what? Like, you know what I mean? It's your music. What do you mean? But like, that's true. Like, a lot of those contracts that they signed many, many decades ago they were like that. They were business contracts from business people trying to screw over the people in order to get the money. That's why you see people like Kanye going crazy about it. Like, as crazy as he might, be sometimes when he comes out with these, tirades and stuff, he's spitting facts about the music industry. But basically, bringing this back to the question that I have for you, I wanted to know what your opinion is on, whether or not you would prefer to be on a major label, or whether you prefer to be, an independent musician and kind of chase that route. Like, where do you fit on that kind of spectrum, and which do you prefer? Which would you want? Like, if a big company tomorrow came and said, hey, we want to give you a contract, is that something you'd be interested in? Where do you sit on this?
I think as far as right now with the state of the world, I feel like independent is working for so many people because of social media, and everything's so easy to access. You want a producer or you don't want a producer, you could hit one up on Instagram, or you can, it's so easy to send projects but back and forth between people. Like, oh, I need you to mix this. Oh, I'll just send it to you real quick, send it back to me next week. And I think that's part of the reason why it's so easy for bands to go independent now, and also just doing like promotional deals with certain labels, like where they don't have anything to do with your music. That's all on you, but they promote you and they promote your music, and you have some kind of contract about them with that. So there's a lot of ways nowadays that I think there's a lot of labels coming out that are truly like in it for the artist now, because there's always been that stigma of just like, oh, there's sharks everywhere, they're gonna steal your music and stuff like this, take all your money. But I think it's getting a lot more honest now. Not to say there isn't still people out there who are gonna try to do that, but
Yeah.
I think people are more aware of a lot of things like that now, and people just want to be good businessmen on top of that too. So yeah, I think but as far as what I would do, I think independent for now.
Yeah.
There's no I have no reason to seek out like a major label at this point, when it's just pretty much, at that point they're getting most of the money for just promotion,
Yeah.
when there's nothing going on right now. But we'll see. And after I, you know, work on a few more things, and yeah, we'll see. You never know. You never know where it's going to go. But as for now, I think the independent way is a good way to go, because you can outsource so many things nowadays.
I think you make a really solid point there. I mean, I've often thought about this over the years as well. Like, if I would get an offer, would I actually take it? And I mean, maybe if it was a really short-term deal, but I feel that at the end of the day, like you said, it's basically paying mostly for that promotion. And do you really need that? With social media, it's free, and you can completely control it yourself. And you know what I mean? It's the easiest time to ever do this. And yeah, I've seen, again, with those distribution deals that you mentioned, I've seen a lot of artists do that, especially independent musicians. It's a great way to kind of get your stuff, at least distributed throughout the world, throughout the right channels. But making sure that those record labels have zero input as far as like creative is concerned, or like making money from things like merchandise and stuff like that. That should all be going to the artist always.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that's awesome. And I think for you, independent is definitely the way to go. But more from the perspective of like having full creative control over your records. I feel that like a lot of the time, these big money contracts really kind of, not always intentionally, but a lot of the time they inhibit the musician's ability to be creative. Like, I felt like that was definitely the case with Matt DeMarco. But there's some people that argue that maybe he should have stayed on a major label because his music was better before. But I think that it's always better when you're fully in control. Creative, when you're a creative, it's like, I think the only thing that you might sort of need from major labels or companies or whatever is like a bit of direction sometimes. Maybe if you're not fully aware of how to navigate certain things. But as far as the creative process is concerned, yeah, I mean, it
Yeah,
should
the
be
thing
easy.
about record labels is that they take the time to study what's going on and what works, and
Yes.
they put a lot into that. And so there's definitely something said about, the formulas they have and what they think will work now and what they think won't. And like I think that's really good to have that outside eye, but then they're gonna own 80% of your music, and they're only going to put the ones out that they feel like will make their money back. And if there's any ones that you're like, oh, I love this song, like it's like the greatest thing I think I've ever really, like, yeah, it's not really what we're looking for. So we own that, but maybe we'll put it out at some point in the next year. Maybe.
I don't know. I don't want to like stay on this issue for too long, but I just keep thinking of examples here. Like Green Day is a really good example. They released a record a year ago, a couple of years ago, Father of All, something like that. And I'm just gonna be controversial and say it's a dreadful record. It's abysmal. Like, they should be ashamed of it. Because the thing is, they're excellent musicians and they've always made fantastic music, even when they went into the whole, um, contemporary music sphere or whatever. They've always told great stories with their records and they've always been very progressive. But that record, according to sources, I mean, I don't know if it's fact, but according to sources, they literally put it out as like an FU to their record label because they just wanted to get off the label, which I understand. But as an artist, I look at that like, but how can you live with yourself that you created a bad record on purpose? Like that just looks bad on you. It's like, I get it. It sucks. But like, come on, man, you're just punishing the fans, really. Like, and like, you'll look back in the future and be like, why did we do that? Like, why? Like,
That's new punk.
yeah, maybe. Yeah. But no, but it's not just them. There's a lot of musicians that have been doing that same thing of like releasing a record on purpose in order to kind of like get out of their contract and then do the next thing. But like a lot of them still release a good record at least, It's like I know it's subjective. But like I think the main reason why I felt like that was a terrible record was that like it was so not them and so poppy to like a laughable amount. Like I couldn't sit and listen to it,
Yeah.
which I blew my mind. Do you
I
know what I mean?
think
Because
I heard the main track on the radio, I think, and I was like, yeah, this is definitely pop music, not the Green Day I know. And I saw a billboard for it, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's not that's not Green Day. I totally see what you're saying. I never listened to anything else from it, but I get everything you're saying just from those two experiences.
that's the thing. Like I'm very open-minded when it comes to music and stuff, and I rarely just say that something is trash. But I looked at what's his name's review, the guy that does all the reviews on YouTube. I can't remember his bloody name. The guy I'm on about with the glasses. I'm gonna kill myself for not remembering this. He has Anthony Fantano is the guy I was thinking of, right? So he always does these reviews and of like major artists, unknown artists, YouTube artists, all sorts. And he's very famous for just, giving his exact opinion and for better or for worse. And I saw his review of that Green Day record and it was scathing to say the least. But I looked at it like, well, that's just one man's opinion. Like, how bad can it really be? So I went and sat down and listened to it, and like, he was right. Like, it was, pardon my language, it was horseshit. Like, just terrible. But yeah. Anyway, back off track there. But I thought that was interesting. It's nice to get your thoughts on that as well. And yeah, so thanks for that. Bringing it back to as a final question on the record, I was very interested to know what kind of instruments and effects and like recording softwares and stuff did you use to sort of create not just the music itself, but the tones and everything as well. I think a lot of musicians out there would be interested to know how
Yeah,
you pulled it
so
off.
I use Logic,
Right.
Logic X. That's I I use a lot of Pro Tools for engineering, but Logic is definitely my production go-to. Uh, I it's mostly just bass guitar and just some organs and synths. And if people are looking for amazing ways to make or easy ways to make amazing drums, Superior Drummer is incredible. It
Mhm.
Most of the drums on there are Superior Drummer, except for I think two tracks have drums, real drums on them, and which my roommate does the drums for. He's a drummer, so I have him do that. But as far as effects, and this is my favorite part for sure, I use guitar pedals for a lot of like vocal effects, drum effects, stuff like that. And I have a bunch of guitar pedals that I just use whenever I feel like a space needs to be filled in. Oh, let's grab these two guitar pedals, put them in a chain, and throw the vocals through it, throw the snare through it, and just try to blend that in, and kind of you know t- patch over this section, like fill it up, like just kind of fill the space a little bit. But I've also been recently working on trying to do more with less, because that's kind of where music's going nowadays, like less is
Mm.
more kind of thing. And so I'll just have some tracks laid out, and then maybe like a few effects, but only if the effects are like adding something. Like I've someone once told me about film, like when you're watching a film, that um everything you see matters. No one would ever put something in a film that doesn't matter. And the same thing for songwriting. Like you shouldn't nothing should be in there that doesn't add to the overall story of this thing. So I kind of took that into the recording and production side of it, and just thought about like, okay, if this doesn't add anything to the overall whole, then it shouldn't be in there, or it shouldn't be like that. It needs to be figured some other way,
Mm.
and stuff like that. But yeah, mostly me, my bass. I have a 5 string jazz bass. It's awesome, love it. And then a Fender Strat and just some MIDI instruments.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, man. That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, moving it forward, you mentioned in a conversation prior to this podcast that you'd moved from Virginia to Los Angeles. I wanted to know kind of why you decided to make the move, and how these states compare, because obviously this podcast has an international reach, and I'm familiar with the differences between states on a kind of a superficial level. I've been to the States very briefly for about 2 weeks, about 6 years ago. So I saw like the state of Nevada and the state of California. But other than that, you know, very novice kind of understanding. So I just wanted to kind of get your perspective on that, and just what prompted the change, how do they compare,
yeah,
etc.
absolutely. Well, I grew up in Virginia. I was born there, and then I actually lived in Northern California for a few years, and then back to Virginia for until college. Moved to Boston for college, and then after college, I was just kind of like, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll try to get a job in LA because that's where all the work is.
Right.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
luckily, was able to get a job in LA, and that's why I'm living here now. And as far as differences goes, I mean, they're pretty much not. I couldn't say polar opposite, but they're about as opposite as it could get in the United States.
Right.
But Virginia, I grew up with a lot of space and a lot of wooded areas, and
Okay.
uh, area to just explore and run around. And I always miss it about that place. I mean, it's beautiful, rolling hills, just everything's green, especially in the fall. This time, it's amazing. And then coming out to California, everything is just extreme, huge.
Mm.
The deepest ocean and huge waves rolling in all the time. Just different vegetation too. Not really forests out here like you see in Virginia until you get like into the northern part of the state. I mean, Southern and Northern California in themselves are just two different kind of climate zones also. But yeah, like honestly, the space is the biggest difference. But that's just because I'm living in LA. The population of the county I live in right now is more than the population of Virginia.
Damn.
So
Awesome.
the,
How do in terms of like songwriting, in terms like with regards to like locations and stuff, do you find like a big difference? Because I found that um since I moved to, because I live in Manchester in the United Kingdom, but I'm originally from London, and when I moved to Estonia a couple of years ago, I felt like my creative juices began to kind of return a bit more, and I was a bit more inspired. But when I came here, suddenly, boom, really, really kind of inspired and everything. And they say that there are, I don't know if you believe this, but they say there are like more creative places in the world, places you should go if you want to get inspired and stuff. And supposedly that's why, Silicon Valley exists, because, in that particular area, that's where people get inspired. So I just wondered where you sit on that. Do you feel, for example, more inspired in California writing songs compared to when you were back in Virginia writing songs growing up? Or how does location affect your creative process?
I definitely believe in like that. Yeah, there's like energies, places, and stuff like that. Not to get too into that, but I think that it's also like very personal, and like it could just be that, if I went somewhere new, I just feel inspired. And over the whole quarantine break, I was able to explore a lot of California and go
Mm,
camping and backpacking a bunch. And I think that honestly inspired a lot of these songs, and just me getting out of a space that I've been in for far too long and getting to a new space. So I think it varies from people to people. When I first came out to LA, I definitely, as soon as I like exited the airport, just kind of felt like, okay, this is the place to be. Like this is
mm,
where you're like for music. And honestly, that could have just been me just, feeling like, okay, I need to do this. Like not couldn't be maybe it's not anything external, maybe it's all internal. And so maybe it's just, feeling people that people get, but it's a collective feeling at the same time in some places, just because a lot people, we're a lot alike in a lot of ways, but we're also very different in a lot of ways too. So I
absolutely.
think I totally believe that there's an energy and a vibe to places like Silicon Valley, because that's where the the greatest, if you're working in the tech industry, that's where the greatest stuff for your industry is happening. And same with LA, there's some of the greatest music in LA, or in that people hear around the world happening in LA. But that's not to say, stuff like an Albert Einstein isn't gonna pop out in, the middle of, Saskatchewan, Canada someday, and just rock the world with their knowledge or something. But I just I agree
Excuse me.
with the thoughts that you had.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you make a good point. I don't think it's an absolute rule, but like for example, another element to what I was saying before is that Manchester has so many of like the greatest bands of all time, at least as far as the UK is concerned. And I've just noticed this over the years. Like for example, I've had a lot of guests on here from Texas in the United States, and that seems to be like another hub as far as like music and film is concerned. So I think it depends. Obviously you get like very talented people from random places that maybe aren't as populated or whatever, but there does seem to be like these hubs, not just in the States and the UK, around the world too, but there's always like certain areas, like when I was in Estonia, it was the same thing. There was a lesser known city. It was like the second city called Tartu. And incidentally, that was where they had like a university there and lots of cultural influences. And I found out many of my favorite musicians were either from there or had lived there at some point and stuff. And I don't know, to me, it always kind of feels like nothing just happens by chance. Everything's kind of connected in that sense. But yeah, no, I just find this stuff interesting.
Yeah. And then, I've just growing up and doing music and then transferring over to the recording side of it because I had an experience doing recording, and the guy we were working with, I was trying, like, I didn't know how to communicate to him what I was trying to like hear. And so that kind of kickstarted me like, okay, maybe if I just can figure this out for myself, then I can just do the things that I think, just do the things that the way I think that I want them to be done.
Yeah.
And that kind of started me into recording and just being able to do that everywhere. And uh, seeing some of the studios in LA was just like, that's what the recording studio in Nashville, but it's different. It's different in different vibe in Nashville for sure, and
Right.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
awesome in Nashville. But um, I've had some cool experiences in Nashville. Crazy. I don't know if yeah. Well, I digress from that.
No, thank you for sharing, man. I appreciate it. One of the things you mentioned there, as we were discussing Los Angeles, was obviously COVID-19, and I always try to keep instances of this to a minimum because I don't like to remind people. We all fucking know we're all dealing with it, but I do kind of find it interesting how everyone adapts to it and how people have learned to work around it and such, and also just how it differs around the world. Because right now in the UK, we've entered a second lockdown, but we've basically been in and out of various kind of levels of restrictions that we refer to as tiers. And obviously, I'm very clued up on America as far as things like professional wrestling and some cultural stuff is concerned. And with being able to observe that, I've seen that more and more things are starting to happen in the States. Like, obviously, on a kind of restricted level, so if there's an event, it will be with social distancing implemented and stuff, and not nearly the amount of capacity that you would have normally. But I just wanted to know, like, how COVID-19 has affected you personally and how you live your life, and also just in general, like what you've seen in Los Angeles, like anything crazy, anything interesting, like what's it like over there?
So for me personally, it hasn't been a huge change because ever since I moved to LA, I've just been working at the studio, and I'll come home, sleep, wake up, go right back to work kind of thing.
Oh, snaps.
So yeah, my and I'd have days off here and there, but those days would be just, sleep, like catching up on sleep and working on music and maybe drive to the beach or something. But yeah, I was never really one for like going out, and so I, kind of always just be at home working on music or doing something, just working on something. And so when all this stuff started, it was kind of just like, okay, now I'm not working. I have too much free time now and don't know what to do. But at the same time, California has been really good about the whole COVID-19 lockdown. They've, everyone takes it seriously here, and
Mm.
uh, you know, that's just how California is. It's like, uh, uh, it's just everyone's concerned about it, and there's always been just like that level of just concern for others here and stuff. But that's also, I feel like, being in LA County, there's a lot of people living in close proximity, so
Mm.
that's kind of something you kind of have to be conscious about, because you never know what's going on in other people's lives. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's just courtesy. When I go back to Virginia, it's a little more lax because there's so much space, and communities aren't, intertwining as much out there. It's like kind of like there's a bunch of people who live out there, no doubt, but everyone kind of is settled into a routine almost. At least, I mean, I'm literally just thinking of my parents who live there still. So I'm just like basically just talking about what they do, and which is like the same stuff every day pretty much. So they've just been living comfortably. They have enough land and stay spaced from everyone. But yeah, I think it's in that sense that's uh two differences between Virginia and California also.
Mm.
But either way, it's always been there's just less reason to wear a mask in Virginia because no one's ever going to the grocery store, and if you do, it's far away. But I mean, they still do, obviously, but it's just not happening as much because they don't need to as much. Like out here, you got to drive. If you're going a block or walking a block, you're passing like apartment buildings and groups of people walking down the street, and that doesn't happen in Virginia. There's no like sidewalks really anywhere.
Um, within that, you kind of mentioned that, yeah, you even pre-COVID, you preferred to kind of like you didn't go out as much. You spend a lot of time at home and all this sort of stuff, and I can totally relate to that. Um, so I was kind of wondering, like, do you consider yourself as maybe like a bit of a workaholic? I know that word sometimes has like a negative connotation, but I think over the years I've kind of realized myself that work can be very good for the soul. And I think if you're doing what you love, then you don't even necessarily consider it as work. Obviously, within everything, there is always little things here and there. Like, for instance, I love being a content creator, but I hate sitting there editing. I mean, it takes forever, but you got to do it. You got to do it, and until you can pay for someone to do that for you, you got to do everything yourself. um, but yeah, I was kind of curious as to that because, you know, it can be a source of entertainment for people. That's one of the things I've realized over the years about, people that are really successful, super rich and all that. Like, people say, oh, why don't they just retire and live off their money? And it's like, work is so much more than that. It's like, it can be a source of enjoyment. It can be therapeutic. It can even just be about experience in life. Do you know what I mean? Like the things you get to experience, things you get to do from it. So yeah, where do you sit on that?
I think I when I first moved out here, starting out in the music industry, everyone's got to pay their dues,
Right.
obviously. And when I first came out here, it was just kind of like, duck my head down, just work as much as possible, and
Mm.
be a yes man. Always do, always be working on it. And luckily, working in a studio, you don't usually have to bring your work home with you
Yeah,
when
yeah.
when you're just like running, getting food for people, or like cleaning stuff. You just go home and you're just like, work is totally separate. But then you're working towards being able to just come in, record people, and leave, and that's all you're doing. And so after a year and a half or so, I was able to just start doing that. And at that point, sometimes your work does follow you home, if you're working on
Hmm.
like something or something like that, but it's usually not that bad. But at at a certain point, it starts it's great because I love doing recording, and I love having a chance to just like deliver something to someone and try to like understand what they want and do that for them, and make them happy about it.
Hmm.
And it's cool to be able to just like have that as my job, and be able to see like kind of create a database for myself. Like, this person said they wanted this, and I did this because of it. So if I ever needed something like that, it's in my toolbox now for my own personal use. And so I think I obviously, at the end of the day, I'm just passionate about music, and recording music was the best way I saw to get straight to the point of it. And so I really went like dove headfirst into that, because like, and I've kind of just over the past 4 years, I feel like maybe I've just been just trying to hone those skills and trying to, figure out what the tools I need to create the kind of output that I want. And at the end of the day, like all the songs from my project, you know, each song was 80% done within the
Mm.
first day of working on it. Like most of the stuff was there, but it's always, the last 20% that takes 80% of the work because it's
Yeah, what
always
is
these,
it with that?
yeah, it's annoying. And yeah, and so, it's always just been, searching for the needle in the haystack with these songs, like trying to make sure find when they're right, or just always just you just feel like you're never done. And
Mm.
off on a huge tangent here, but someone told me recently that sometimes 80% is enough, and like I guarantee you, there's countless songs out there, countless hit songs out there where they had no idea what it was going to be. They were like, "It's not done. I don't like it," but they put it out and it became a hit. So it doesn't work until it works, kind of thing. And that's for this whole project. That's kind of when I was just like, you know what, I'm putting it out. And I think over the years of doing all this recording and just focusing on work
Mm.
has kind of like, and then all of a sudden getting all this free time has just kind of been like, okay, you've been doing this for years. It's time to just do this now, something like that.
Speaking about your
And
free time as well, I was just kind of interested. What does your life look like outside of audio production and music and stuff? Like what do you do to kind of like unwind and just kind of like get away from it, like work and everything like that, and just chillax?
recently, in the past couple of months, I have gotten really into surfing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that is uh, that has been just that. It was over quarantine, over the past, like before summer and early summer, I was doing a lot of camping because it was just easy to get out and get away from people. And now that it's winter and it's colder, I can go surfing like pretty much every day if I wanted to. And it's just right there, and it's just so nice just being out floating in the water, like not even when you're sitting there waiting for like some waves to come by, just sitting in the water and just seeing everything, and just like it's an amazing experience, just being in the ocean, honestly. And I'm derailing again. What question were we on?
How did you get into surfing?
I'd done it when I was younger, and I've been snowboarding pretty much my whole life.
Right. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it just seemed like it's something you can do year round here.
Mm.
And it just seemed like a no-brainer for me to get into it, and I've been loving it so much. It's a great way to exercise too, that's for sure.
Did you ever get into skateboarding? Because I know like snowboarding is very similar to surfing, and skating's similar to surf. Like they're all kind of like part of like the Venn diagram, aren't they? Did you ever do that?
For sure. I have some longboards. I never really got into like street skate, or like the street skating, or like uh,
Yeah.
shortboard. I think that's what they're called, shortboards. But I did it when I was younger,
Hmm.
and I could do, I don't even, I maybe landed a kickflip like twice in my life. But snowboarding was a little easier for me.
Mm.
Obviously, it's strapped to your feet and you can just fly down a mountain. Uh, but yeah, so I mean, the surfing is kind of what I've been using recently to just get away from everything and just be in nature for a couple hours. I also do like playing another. I wouldn't say it's a guilty pleasure because a lot of people do video games, but I don't play many video games. But I'll have one video game at a time for like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
years. And so um, I've been really into No Man's Sky. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Oh, I don't know. Unfortunately, I think I've heard the name of the game before. Yeah.
You're basically just a space explorer, and it's a computer generated universe that,
Oh, nice.
and you can just explore and find things and do. It's like the Elder Scrolls, like Skyrim or Oblivion games. It's an open world game,
Oh, nice one.
open universe. But I've been into that just to kind of like get away from working on things and staring at a computer. I just can mindlessly explore space.
Sounds awesome, man. As a final kind of question, I just wanted to ask you, do you have any upcoming projects or maybe some final thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Um, as far as final thoughts go, there was something you said earlier about um, how people who aren't musicians or don't really like have their hand or in music contributing to songs and stuff. I wanted to say that I think about that all the time, and I've told my friends before, like if you show like a song to someone who maybe doesn't know like what's going on,
Mm.
and their input is almost more valuable than someone who does know what's going on, because they'll tell you, oh, I think this part made me happy, and then this part made me feel like, something like that, something in those kind of terms. And when you figure out what that means and how to change that person's way of feeling, that's when
Mm.
stuff starts becoming powerful, I think. And just reaching people, and not just, you know doing making music that creates a feeling, and it's not just like, oh, look, I played this on my guitar, it's a really fast lick. And I've just kind of, like, I went to music school, and I kind of always was around people who were just insane musicians, like
Yeah,
like
yeah.
prodigies kind of thing. And I was always into reggae through music school, and not many people were. It was mostly, all the technical stuff. And I was kind of like, maybe it kind of pushed me in the more direction of like how something sounds and how the sound affects you, as opposed to what the sound is or what the sound's doing. And
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that, man. I mean, I've met so many and played with so many musicians over the time that were so obsessed with the technicalities, especially like, because I played rock and metal for many years, and it was always like, who's the fastest, who can do the best solos, who's got the best knowledge of these scales, blah 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 blah, and like that stuff is all impressive and everything, but it's like there's always a limit to that stuff. You know what I mean? And I feel that, yeah, soul and the depth of a song is so much more, like here's a really good example. I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, this guitarist is better than Hendrix and stuff because he can play better than Hendrix and blah blah blah, and it's like, that's great, but like, every time I put on a Hendrix song, you know, it feels the same as the first time I listened to it when I was like 8 years old. It's that kind of, and it's not nostalgia. It's the feeling it gives you. And I feel that there are many musicians out there that that whole feeling it's not like it's been eliminated, but they focus so much on the instruments that they don't really think about like how the music makes them feel. And like, to your point before about it being so valuable, like a non-musician's input being so much, so maybe even more valuable, I couldn't agree more with that, because they are just looking at it as a listener. They're not looking at it as anything else. So I think it's important to just retain that, and make sure, even if you are a regular musician and everything, just yeah, try to just put it outside of your head for a minute and just sit and listen and see how it makes you feel, see how it moves you. I feel that music that moves you in some way is always going to be timeless, whereas music that is amazing and fast, and or like really detailed and intricate, it can be amazing and it can stand the test of time, but I think it depends. I think the stuff that we humans, we're a very emotional bunch, and I feel that like that stuff is really what tends to maybe inspire us, I guess, in some shape or form. I don't know. I feel like music holds such a bigger part of life than we realize. Like, I can think of so many songs for me personally that defined a period in my life, or that I connect with a memory or like a movie or a show or whatever, and it kind of blows my mind how you can listen to certain things and it always makes you feel the same way, or it really always brings you back to a certain time. Or sometimes like I'll be listening to a song and it will remind me of like a smell or something like that. It's kind of crazy how music can do that. So yeah, I
yeah,
couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and music's definitely very powerful.
Well, listen, thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and best of luck with this record in terms of, just getting the word out there and everything. I think it's an excellent record. Once again, for a final time, I'm going to shout it out. Please go and check out Andrew and the Moon, What the Future Holds. You can find it on all good streaming platforms and everywhere online. And yeah, just a big thank you, man, for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, man. Glad to have met you. I'm sure we'll talk again soon. And yeah, appreciate it. This is my first podcast, Andrew and the Moon.
Awesome. Oh, I'm honored. Thank you for agreeing to be part of the first time. Also, I wanted to say a quick shout out to all of my listeners. Please make sure if you're watching this on YouTube to subscribe and share it, and just get the word out. If you like this, tell me why. If you don't like this, tell me why. Same with all of the streaming platforms. If you listen to the podcast on Spotify, or if you listen to it on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to it, reach out to me on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you use social media. Just let me know your thoughts. Let me know how you feel about it. Who you'd like to see appear on the show in the future, who you'd like to what you'd like to hear about, topics wise. Also, make sure to follow and leave us reviews if you use Apple Podcasts, for instance. All of that stuff massively helps me. But more importantly than anything else, I care about what you guys think. That's what I'm always really kind of drawn to, because I always make sure to do what I love. But your input does mean a lot to me, and I do try to take it into account whenever I create things. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening to this episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. And until next time, peace out, one love. I'll see you in the next one.